want to share a little bit about the psoas muscle, where it is, what it does, how you can work with it, what not to do, and what are some of the common confusions and misconceptions that are actually contributing to exacerbating some of the issues that people have with the psoas muscles. So first, let's talk about where your psoas muscles are. You have two, and they go on either side of your spine. So the psoas muscles attach on one end from the lesser trochanters. So these are these bony protrusions kind of at your groin or just below groin in your inner thigh on either side. And so attaching from here, going along the fronts of your hip creases, and then all behind your abdominal organs, going and attaching through all of the lumbar vertebrae and discs, and then finally attaching to the very lowest of your thoracic vertebrae, so just above the lumbar spine. So these are huge muscles that are attached to a lot of important sites. So going through the whole pelvis, from below the pelvis at your legs, going through your whole pelvis, and then attaching all the way up through your all of your lumbar vertebrae, and then attaching to the bottom of your rib cage. What this muscle does mechanically is allows you to bring your chest toward your thighs or your thighs toward your chest. So anytime you are folded, such as in a seated position, okay, you are shortening the psoas muscles on both sides, which is part of what the psoas muscles are there to do. But the psoas muscles are, for all of us, really chronically shortened because we're in a seated position for so many hours of the day, and your body really adapts to whatever you are habituated to doing. So if you're sitting in a car, sitting at a desk, sitting on a couch, or in any position where your knees are coming toward your chest or your chest is going toward your knees, you are shortening the psoas muscles. That's fine. That's part of what the psoas muscles are supposed to do, but they're chronically shortened, and most people have psoas muscles that are about 3 inches shorter than the potential length that they have. So there are some problems associated with having a chronically short and tight psoas muscle, and I'll show you what it is. When you stand up from sitting, have you ever had this experience where you go to stand up and then you feel a little tight and stuck, and then you straighten yourself up? What's happening is the psoas muscles are short, and you're having to work against that shortness in order to stand up. Now, you may think that when you stand up, or for yoga people, when you do a back bend, that you're lengthening the psoas muscles. But when the psoas muscles are chronically 3 inches shorter than the length they're supposed to have, here's what generally happens. The psoas muscles are tight, and so when you think you're lengthening the hip creases, the hip flexors, which is a package of a number of muscles, and the psoas is one of them, when you go to stand up, or even to go into a back bend, or say stretch this area, what's actually happening is internally, because that muscle's so deeply embedded, internally, you're actually still in a forward bend. And so what many people do is they tighten the buttocks and they turn the thighs out, and then they arch the waist. And then it looks like you're standing up straight, but you'll end up with this sway back here and a protruding low belly there. And internally, the psoas is actually really still short and tight. Along with it, the iliacus muscle and the pubococcygeal muscle, which connects from your pubic bone to your tailbone, these all tend to grab together in symphony. These are all really tight. So internally, you're in a fetal position, and you're counterbalancing with more muscle tension on top to be straight, or go into a back bend. Still, that shortening and tightening is still happening inside the body with those deeply embedded muscles. The other thing beyond the biomechanics of the muscle and how you're using your body is what happens anytime we go into fear, worry, anxiety, or insecurity. So from the time you were born, and maybe even in utero, when there was an experience of fear or threat or lack or loss or insecurity, your body wants to go into a fetal position or prepare to run. And for both of these things to happen, the psoas clamps down and shortens. Now, that's necessary and useful when you're under true threat, but biologically, your body and mind doesn't actually know the difference between the threat of, say, being sleep trained as an infant versus the threat of being hunted by a tiger in the jungle. So you have possibly been gripping chronically due to fear, threat, abandonment, whether it's real or perceived, since you were an infant. It has to do with the fear of falling, okay, that the psoas grips to provide stability where there is a perceived threat or lack of stability, or a real threat or lack of stability. The psoas is doing its job. And this is why I call it the benevolent psoas, because it's benevolent in its capacity to lengthen and allow you to truly stand up and be available to your life and be open to your life and be available and open to your responsibilities. But it's also benevolent in its ability to shorten in response to threat. It is your body's attempt to protect itself that causes the psoas muscles to shorten when you are feeling any sense of fear or anxiety. And that is a form of benevolence as well. Now, what to do about this? Most of what we see in the PT world and in the conventional world of yoga land and yoga therapy land is to strengthen and stretch. This is a binary that a lot of the body mechanics world is stuck in right now. You have two options, and usually people are doing both of these, strengthen and stretch. Now, your psoas muscle actually doesn't need to be strengthened in the conventional sense of the word. It's already working really hard all the time. If you feel that your psoas muscles are weak, they may be, but it's because they are short and tight. And a short, tight muscle is a weak muscle. So strengthening and engaging the psoas muscle is the opposite of what's needed. What's needed is lengthening the muscle in order to provide more capacity, resiliency, an ability to stand up, and a freedom from pain and a freedom from fear. So the strengthening or engaging the psoas is unnecessary, useless, and actually exacerbates the problem of having a short, tight psoas muscle or short, tight psoas muscles. Now, the other thing that could be done is strengthening your butt muscles and your leg muscles. But this is what you are sort of already doing if you're efforting to stand up straight in spite of your chronically tight psoas. So what you will tend to do is what I was just demonstrating: grip the buttocks, turn the thigh bones outward, and tighten the upper back above the waist or through the waist as well, in order to counterbalance the fact that the shortened psoas muscles are pulling you forward into a fetal position. So you could strengthen those other muscles, but they'll give out eventually because they're doing a job that's not theirs to do, and they're fighting against this 3 inches of shortening of the psoas muscle. That's not a really good long-term plan. You're not really dealing with the underlying issue. The other thing that people like to do is stretch. When people go to try to stretch the psoas muscle, say by doing an extreme lunge, what's actually happening is, again, they're taking a tight, short psoas muscle into that movement with them. It's deeply embedded and staying tight and short. And so what people think they're stretching the psoas, what they're actually doing is stretching surrounding ligaments. And the psoas internally is staying tight. And this is why we'll see maybe the thigh bone will turn out, the hips go a little bit wonky, and the back starts to arch unnecessarily. That overstretching of ligaments will actually also cause other surrounding muscles to further tighten and grip in order to provide more stability where the body now feels destabilized due to overstretching. So this is a problem. So we have to get off of this binary of strengthen and stretching. When we're working with the psoas, what's actually needed is releasing and lengthening. This is a subtle, deeply internal process that might not look like what you would expect it to look like, and it will feel very subtle, but actually allow for a true lengthening of the psoas muscles so that you can stand up, long, soft, tall, resilient, relatively effortlessly, and be fearlessly available to your life and your responsibilities, and free from the kind of pain that's associated with having those short psoas muscles. I'm teaching a full month on the psoas and on releasing the psoas, which is releasing the benevolent psoas. And we will use different techniques to passively and actively release and lengthen the psoas muscle in a way that truly accesses those muscles, even though they're very deeply embedded. Along with that, we will passively and actively release pelvic muscles and rib cage muscles so that we're treating the body as a whole, full symphony, not a bunch of constituent separate parts, which is how we talk about the body, but it's not really how the body functions. Your body is not a bunch of parts stuck together. All these parts work together, and they work together not just at the physiological level, but at the psychological level, at the energetic level, and beyond. So with the Supreme Release Yoga practice, we'll be focusing on not just the psoas muscles, though we'll emphasize that area this month. We will also be releasing all of those other areas that work in symphony with the psoas muscles to give you that true length and release.